call us to order. This is the first weekly meeting of 2022, so thank you all for being here. So today's inspirational moment from someone you probably have seen before, Nelson Mandela. There can be no greater gift than that of giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return. Words of wisdom to live by. I'm going to have Carl Cates come up here to introduce our guest today.
Bless you all, especially Brian Riga. You know, you can just hear him the whole time you're walking up here. It's my pleasure today to introduce the program. I didn't ask for a lot of information about Dr. Balducci. She's one of my department chairs. I know a lot. And Arkansas State's blessed with a great collection of faculty. And some of those faculty choose to take on leadership roles. And Temma has been one of those. She's in her 5th year, I believe, as chair of art plus design. And if you've been following the news, you know that we announced this major art and innovation district with an anchor building, and that the art department will be the anchor of that building. She's deeply involved in planning, and this is a project that moves the entire region forward, not just our campus. And that requires someone who is, forward thinking and has a servant heart. Another way that servant heart is manifested is her work and her eagerness. She came to me a while back and said, I'm interested in Rotary. We talked about it. And she's immediately become engaged in not only the University Club, but in with the work with the Rotary Youth Exchange. And that is what she'll be talking with us about that today. Dr. Balducci, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Cates. So I'm here to talk about Rotary Youth Exchange, and I'm going to introduce our actual speaker today, who's Vincent Guest. But one of the reasons I'm here is because my daughter has applied for a Rotary Youth Exchange, and she has been accepted. So she is going off somewhere next year, apparently France, Italy, or Japan. Trying not to be too sad about that because she'll only be in 11th grade. But we need a host family for the inbound student. And so that's one of the reasons that we want to talk to you about the Rotary Youth Exchange and just give you some more information about that. So having said that, I want to introduce Vincent Guest. As you know already, he's from the Wynne Rotary. He was District Rotarian of the Year, 2019-2020. And is also the Rotary Youth Exchange coordinator for our district. I'm kind of learning the ropes a little bit from Vincent. He's been doing it for so long. And he's also been host dad to about half a dozen exchange students, so that he's become really close to over the years and stayed in contact with. So he has a lot of experience with that and can answer lots of questions or questions that you have. So please join me in welcoming Vincent.
I don't know where you got that picture, but as my wife would say, it looks like I'm choking on my own fat. And she's used that to describe me in the past. And so I would hope that we would find a different picture next time. Yes, I appreciate that. But my name's Vince, and I'm at the Wynne Rotary Club, and I've been the Youth Exchange Officer here in our district for a few years. Susan Chan was my cohort for a few years, and she retired and moved to Georgia. And so Temma has volunteered to help us. We always need other volunteers. I think Rotary Youth Exchange is one of the best programs in our district because it works on an international scale. And so we have a Youth Exchange District website that's Rotary6150youthexchange.org, and it has all of the information that you could ever want to know about our district youth exchange program. I often tell folks that you can pull out your cell phones right now and you can pull it up and you can look at it. That way, when you're looking at it, because something else more interesting than my talk comes up, then I can just believe that you are looking at the Rotary District website as opposed to checking your email or looking at Facebook or Instagram or whatever young folks look at now. I have no idea. But here's the website. And just a real quick little bit of information. Our youth exchange program is over 2 different types of programs, with the ones that we usually see that come to our district conferences have been here for the school year. Those are long-term youth exchange programs, and that's the one that Temma's daughter was accepted into, where they'll go for the traditional school year. They'll come in August and they'll say through the summertime, and they will spend a whole year with host family. Rotary requires it to be held just a little bit different, and they have to stay between 2 and 4 host families. I think it works out well because all of us do things a little bit different, and they don't go home skewed to think that every American does stuff the way that my family does it, and have our own idiosyncrasies. And so they get a little bit more of an experience by living in at least 2 different families and seeing how more Americans live than just mine. And so they'll live in the homes and experience America that way. Short-term exchanges are the ones that occur just over the summertime. And those are true exchanges where if the student wants to go to Germany and we find another student that would be similar age, similar interest, and we would match your son, daughter, granddaughter, niece, nephew up with another family that has a child with similar interest, they would go spend 2 to 6 weeks with that child in Germany. And then that child comes back and stays in the same home with the other child for that same amount of time here. So it's an actual true exchange that those children get to spend the whole summer together, but it's the same family. And usually people have less fear of that because they're not losing their child for a whole year, as Temma was saying. And sometimes the mom factor doesn't get in the way as bad because they're not going to take care of my child. They're not going to do things. And I say, well, if you send them over there and they don't take care of your child, you can always get back at them when they send their child over here. We never have that issue, but sometimes, moms get these weird ideas. Now, you don't usually hear that from the dads. That's the only reason I'm picking on the moms at the moment, because dads are usually trying to push them out the door and moms want to hold them back as long as they can. Our youth exchange program, if you've got a child from 14 and a half to 19, those are the parameters. And Rotary has about 9,000 students involved in its youth exchange program every year, except this last year, it had 0. And that's because Rotary International chose not to allow that because of COVID. But as we've tried in the past, Jonesboro has not ever sent a long-term exchange student since I've been involved in the last 17 years. It's just not been an area that has sent any. I have sent 4 short-term exchange students from the Jonesboro area. I know that there are exchange students that are in schools in Jonesboro, but I don't know why they're not using our Rotary exchange program, except that we're not getting out there and doing a good job of selling the program. And the only way that people know about it is because we as Rotarians tell them. If you look at the top here, it says, "Welcome to Rotary Youth Exchange Scholarships." Maybe some of the folks at the back table, I know a couple of them do media or television. They have tried to say that we should sell it as a scholarship program, because how many of you in your Rotarian work actually get paid? I didn't see any hands. So that's the same amount that I get paid for doing my Rotary work. And so with Rotary Youth Exchange, our cost, you see it says valued at $20,000. Some of these other exchange programs will charge upwards of $20,000 for a long-term exchange program. Our cost is less than $5,000 for the year program. And you know why that is, because all of our volunteer hours offset the cost that everyone else charges for the folks' time and labor and those expenses. So it's a really good opportunity for students. And the other benefit is that we actually care. I'm not saying the other programs don't, but we're not there to make a living at it. We care that the students have a good time. And when we send students to Japan, when we send students to Germany or Slovakia or Estonia, we know that there's going to be some Rotarians on the other side that are going to take care of our students. Now, I always enjoy telling my stories because I think those give us a little bit better idea of what it's like. Hatton, who's in the back, actually, I didn't know what was on this website because I don't keep it up, but a couple of years ago at George Frey's district conference in 2020, we had a virtual conference. And so we had some exchange students that spoke, and a couple of them, I'll show you. Right here, he sings all the time. He knows every song that there is. It was amazing to me. And this one right here, he was in my home as well. Jose could sing just about every song that there is. And I always thought that was amazing. How do you come from Brazil and you know every song that there is in English? And we were riding to church one Sunday, and he was singing an old Stevie Wonder song. I think it's Stevie Wonder. Tell me, it was, I Just Called to Say I Love You. Is that Stevie Wonder? And I sat there and I said, Jose, how do you know that song? And he said, oh, I just know all these songs. And I said, and you're always so happy. And he said, well, shouldn't we all be happy? And I said, well, we should. I don't think everyone is always happy, but he just always had this joy about singing in life. And it taught me a lot at that moment. But I figured out later the way he knew all the lyrics is that there's these websites that you can go on and look up A to Z lyrics. And that's what he was doing. And so I guess if things are important to you, that's what you do. But he was just always doing those kind of things. And some of the benefits that you get from hosting students, since that's what we were here to talk about, is that it's not just a benefit to the kids because they learn the culture, they get to see America, we spread goodwill to other countries, but there's a benefit to you as well. They become part of your family. I've traveled, the one that's on the far right, I went on a round the world trip, and on part of that trip, I ended up in Prague. Well, he was studying in England at the time, and so he came over and met me, and we spent a few days there because they end up being just like your own son or daughter. You take care of them just like that because you don't want anybody to hurt them. But when Felipe, the one on the right, was studying his American history homework, because that always becomes my job. My wife doesn't like teaching American history to the kids. He was sitting there and we were going over it and we were studying, and I was explaining something. And when he finally got something and understood the concept, I said, good job, okay. And his eyes got big as saucers and he turned red and he said, what does this mean? And I said, it means good, that you did good. It's okay. And he said, that does not mean that in Brazil. And I said, well, what does it mean in Brazil? He said, well, it's the bird, but in the butt. And I said, well, it doesn't mean that in America. And so I said, all right. And so as we went through the year with Felipe, he had trouble with his English teacher, and we were always having difficulties with that. He said, I think she embarrasses me on purpose. And I said, Felipe, well, when she does that and you finally get the right answer, why don't you just say, okay, Mrs. So-and-so. And I said, to you, you're doing all right. I said, she thinks you're saying okay. And in your mind, he never would do it. But, if it was me, I would be, okay, Mrs. So-and-so. But, you learn different pieces of their culture while you're trying to teach them about yours. And one of the things that we have trouble with is sometimes we use colloquialisms. I don't, when I speak in public, I try to sound like I'm just a little bit educated. And I'm an attorney by trade, and so I have to speak, and we go to deposition, so I get it printed out what I say. So I try not to use so and well and repeat those things because I know that I can do that. But sometimes we will say, has anyone ever said, hurry up, we're fixing to leave? Maybe. And then have you ever thought about what fixing to leave means? Because if you have somebody that's not a native Southern speaker, they're going to say, what are you fixing? And you'll have questions like that when you have someone that comes from a different place, that they're going to ask you questions. Why did you say that? Why did you choose those words? And so you learn a lot about how we use words and what our language means and how we go about saying things. And then you also get the amusing things of sometimes they say the wrong words or they just choose the wrong words. I had the girl who turned out to be Miss Brazil 2015 lived in our home. And she only lived in our home because no one else in the club would take her because some of the gentlemen said their wives would not let her live in their house. And so she was there and she would always have her friends come over to the house. And I said, Isis, how are you going to get home tonight? And she was talking about this boy that was her friend. And she said, he will ride me. And all of her friends stood there. I was making a sandwich at the bar. They turned red. There's this old man standing there and no one. And she said, what did I say? And I said, well, we don't normally say things like that. And she said, well, what does it mean? And I said, they'll tell you when you get out in the car. They don't want to say in front of me. And so you end up with some of those things as well. And some of the students that we have work very, very hard at what they do. I had my very first Rotary Exchange student that was going to come and stay with us. I would communicate with him over the internet. This was 15 years ago. And he would send an email. I would send an email and I would get one back. He was in Spain, so I'd get one a day and a half later, maybe 2 days. And I would give it just because of the time difference and maybe getting up and those things. And it would come back in perfect English. And then I would respond and I would get a second email and so on, but it was always in perfect English. So when I went to pick him up at the Memphis airport, I thought it's not going to have any difficulty at all. And my wife was gone to take care of her mother in New York because she was having some health issues. And so it was just me at the house. And when I picked him up at the airport, he was 14 and a half years old and about this tall and had his Rotary blazer on, just smiling as big as could be. And I said, Carlos, how are you? Are you doing okay? Yes. And I said, did you have a good trip? Yes. I said, are you happy to be here? Yes. I said, are you hungry? Yes. What would you like to eat? Yes. And I figured out shortly that his grasp of the English language was yes. And so I thought, well, this is not going to work out very well because I have mastered one language almost, and that's English, and that's about it. And so we couldn't speak anything. And so we just sat there and I said, I don't know. We didn't have apps back then that could translate stuff. So we just smiled. We went to a Japanese restaurant that cooked some stuff on some flames. And then we just sat there and I thought, what am I going to do? And so I thought, there is a guy who married a daughter of a missionary to some Central American country. We're going to go to their house and translate. And I called and she said, our Spanish is not the same as Spain Spanish. And I said, you know what? It's closer than what I got now. So we're going to figure something out. And so that's how we communicated. But the thing that I learned from that was he's 14 and a half, and he was willing to come to a place where he didn't speak the language and was trusting and willing to learn. And, you know, by November, he spoke English just as well as my son. And I'm not saying my son doesn't speak English very well, but, you know, he was doing just as well as my son. And, you know, you can experience this and make a really good, have a really good time with these students and learn just as much from them as we can give to them in return. And I think it's one of the best programs that Rotary has that we just don't utilize very well. It's not a big expenditure of time for the club. It's not a big expenditure of money for the club, but it's one thing that you can really use to help expand horizons for students that they'll interact with in your home and students that they'll interact with at school. It's not as big a deal in Jonesboro because there's international students with the university that people can have an opportunity to interact with. But in most communities in the Delta, you're going to have white folks, you're going to have black folks, and they've lived in those towns for 50 or 75 or 100 years, and that's it. And there's not going to be a lot of differing opinions. It's going to be, this is the way we've done it, and that's all there is. And so having a different person come in that has different views and a different world experience is something that can change someone's outlook. And so I think that gives a really good opportunity, not only for the student, but for the community as well. And so I will finish there so that I don't run over, because when I was president, I hated when speakers ran over. Anyone have any questions?
This is John Carmack. Are there any, is there a need for more hosts in this area to take more students? And if there are, what are the requirements if you wanted to host a foreign exchange student? Do you have to yourself have a child to send across the sea to exchange? Or is it literally just like you just agree to host someone?
There's a spot on the website that's got host families, and it says the responsibilities right there. You just have to be willing to be the parent and that you treat them just like your own child. You provide everything that you would for a normal, you're going to provide room and board and lunch money. They're going to come with their own money for clothes and going on outings and things. But we do need a host family. We have students when they leave, and if a club wants to host, that's always the issue that we've had. The clubs have wanted to host in the past, but the issue is always having someone that says, yes, we will host. And so with Rotary, we have to have at least 2 host families for each student, because they only can stay for a half of the year, just so that I think it works better, because if you do have a issue, which they're rare, but sometimes people's personalities don't always get along. And so it works out better, but it's got the issue there, but you're just going to be a parent and you can't have a criminal history. How about that?
So I think it's a great program if anybody can get involved in it and give it a shot. So I do want to say thank you for being with us today on all that. So thank you again for being with us today. Next week, we have Total Life Healthcare, the PACE program with Bob Harris. So with that, this meeting is adjourned, I believe, and we will see you next Tuesday.